So.
Good.
Okay, Mayor, we're live.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 12th weekly Mayor's Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. For those who come on later on to watch this, we appreciate you watching the city in action. This week, we are going to change our focus from COVID. We're going to be talking more about our community, our very diverse community here in San Ramon. As a quick introduction, most anybody would look at San Ramon and view us as being a very successful city. Percentage of population that makes over $100,000 a year. We're ranked as among the top in the country. Very low crime, among the safest cities there are anywhere in California, let alone the nation. And yet at the same time, we should recognize that we are a majority minority city. US Census tells us that 30% plus of our residents were born in another country. The English language is only the first language in 62% of the households in San Ramon. So we're a very diverse community. About 3 years ago, I reached out to a number of our community members and asked them to get together. That with the indications that we are really a successful city, there still was an important element of asking how we're doing. How are our different groups in our city feeling? Do they feel safe? Do they feel welcomed? What are the issues that might be involved with our city? And so I had reached out to a number, and we got together about 3 years ago. Mitchell Hopson, who I'll be more formally introducing in a second, was asked by the group to take a lead on this and to lead the group. And they've been meeting for the last 3 years, usually every couple of months, sometimes more often, tackling a number of issues. It should be noted that this is a community-driven, resident-driven coalition. It's not a city-sponsored event, although the city does open up space at City Hall for their meetings. We have had our police officers, in particular Captain Denton Carlson, at almost all the meetings from the get-go, along the city manager. Joe Gorton has been at all the meetings, and I've also attended all of the meetings. But only as observers in most ways, and to watch what's going on, to answer questions. And so I'm really proud of the work they've been doing over the years. And I've asked them to join us today and to have a conversation along with our police officers about how we're doing as a community. And so I'd like to introduce, if I can, Mitchell Hopson. Mitchell is the chair of the committee, and he'll be leading the conversation after I finish with the rest of the introductions. Kathy Chiverton, who's been our guest before, who is the executive director of the Discovery Center. Jacquie Guzzo, who is a parent, very involved in PFLAG, and was instrumental in helping our city work through the process of raising the gay pride flag, the Philly flag over City Hall. And I know that one of my friends, I sent pictures of that to this week, and we're very happy to see that flag. We also have our city manager, Joe Gorton, our assistant and our deputy city manager, Steve Spadowski. And of course, Steve takes all the questions, and he'll be answering your questions, which is my segue into saying, if you have questions for this group, send them to info@sanramon.ca.gov. We'll be collecting those questions during this process, and with the ones we've already collected, to ask for the members who are here. Police Chief Craig Stevens is here. Captain Carlson, Denton Carlson is here, who's been very involved from this committee from the get-go. And I want to welcome for the first time, Lieutenant Tami Williams, also here. So I'm going to take it and punt the ball over to you, Mitchell, to start the conversation. You want to do an introduction for the group?
Hi, my name is Mitchell Hopson. I appreciate you giving me time today to speak about an organization that's very close to me, the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition. Before I talk about the organization itself, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background about myself and how I got to this point. My wife and I, my 4 kids, we came to the San Ramon Valley area about 8 years ago. And as you can see, I'm an African-American man with African-American wife and African-American children. And we clearly realized that the African-American population in the local Valley area is very small. So what we did was we tried to connect with like-minded or other families like ours. And so I joined an organization called the Diablo Black Men's Group. And it was a great way for me to get connected to the community. But like most people, I stayed within my African-American community. I went to work, I went home, and that was pretty much it for the first 2 years. Based off that starting block, I was able to join Leadership San Ramon, which also gave me an opportunity to get more involved with the community and the city. And from that, I started to branch out a little bit more, and I really felt good about the community. I really felt more invested in my kids' education, my kids' school, my local area. And from that, I continue to realize that most people don't have the time or don't know how to get involved in their community. They are, for the most part, stay in their silo organization, their silo groups. So at around 2017, January 2017, Bill approached myself and some other people to join and create an organization or a group conversation for the most part that talks about how can we as community members get together and build a healthy community, build bridges between our siloed environments. And that was the most engaging and rewarding opportunity for me, because I had lived in an organization or this community about 5 years before I actually met various people. And I think that that was the big catalyst how we're going to continue to build a healthy community. And I say that specifically because I have an older stepson and I have 3 smaller kids. And I would hate for my kids not to get the same value out of the community or the same opportunities out of the community that everyone else is. And I think being part of the community, connecting with the community, helps bridge those gaps. And that's why we're here. That's why we're very proud to be part of the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition. Stephen, if you could put on our mission statement. Okay. Okay, so this is our mission statement. So the group took its time to figure out what did we want to do? Were we going to be part of the city? Were we going to be an independent grassroots organization? Who are we going to serve? What was our goals? And we came up with this mission statement after doing a lot of wordsmithing and grouping. The San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition are members of the diverse San Ramon Valley community who are joined together to serve as a forum for constructive dialogue and as a catalyst to create solutions to build a community of inclusion, equity, where we all thrive. And I think that's important. So as we look at diversity, inclusion, equity, it's important that we all feel a sense of pride and a sense of belonging within our community. And more specifically, we decided that it wouldn't just be a San Ramon-based group, it would be San Ramon Valley area. So those who live in neighboring cities can join, those who work in the area, and those who live in the area as well. So we felt very strongly that we realized that we don't live and work in just one city. We go beyond the borders. And we have friends and we have colleagues who also live outside the San Ramon city limits. And so it's very important for myself personally that my neighbors in Danville, Dublin, Alamo, that I interact with can also be part of this coalition group. So far, like I said, we've been together 3 years. We've grown the group from about 15 to around 50 on an annual basis. We tend to have our meetings every other month throughout the school year. We send out agendas, we try to have speakers. And I think it's a testament to the quality of people in this community that we've been together this long. No one's getting paid, no one's getting famous, rich, or starting this as a political campaign, but more so, these are just great people who love their community, who want to, more importantly, build bridges between the diverse groups in our area. With that being said, I will pass it over to Jacquie to talk about some of the things we've done in the past.
Very good. Thank you, Mitchell. And thank you, Mayor Clarkson, for having us here this morning. I would like to say thank you to the City Council for voting to raise the Philly Pride flag. For those of you who don't know, that black and brown stripe on the flag, that was added in 2014 in Philadelphia for the first time to recognize the issues of our people of color who are part of the LGBTQ community. So thank you for that. So my name is Jacquie Guzzo. I joined this coalition a year ago in March. I'm the parent of a transgender, successful, happy 26-year-old man. My decision to become a member of the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition came out of a need to do something. My son didn't come out until he was an adult. We're close, he appreciates what I do, and he steps in when the transgender voice is needed. But where was I when he needed me? He explains it wasn't me. He just knew that he had to be away at college before he would be safe coming out because he was too vulnerable in this environment. So I recognized this was a problem and I wanted to fix it. Caden tells me constantly, don't worry about making mistakes with labels or terminology. SRVDC, our diversity coalition here, is just the kind of community where I'm with people who don't look like me and where I learn how to make mistakes. So that's how I grow and work towards deeper connections with people with different life experiences. I'm grateful I did because SRVDC has taught me that people will listen to my voice because of my privilege, where my son's voice would not be heard, nor necessarily even welcome. So I'm learning the nuts and bolts in this coalition about how to do this with the help of this group of people. So recognizing my privilege is one step. I have a long list of things that I didn't necessarily earn or which were super easy for me to obtain. Those are my privileges. One might surprise you though. I am a female. Yes, while male is dominant, non-binary and transgender individuals are at a disadvantage to female. So that's one of my privileges. I've learned at SRVDC that our privilege can make us uncomfortable. My own personal experience where my son didn't feel safe coming out to me gives me motivation to do this self-improvement work that we do in the coalition all the time. So my part of this presentation is to let you know what the coalition has been doing. We did listen to presentations by our youth. Our theme for one night was young people in our community and more than one voice. We listened and then engaged in dialogue over a student who presented a TED Talk of a Nigerian female author's story called The Danger of a Single Story. Oh, we learned a lot that night because that night we learned about the default position of dominance and our sometimes patronizing, well-meaning pity. Because she was an author, she became an author, and at a young age, she'd only read British books. And so she wrote about characters who were white, blue-eyed, lived where it snowed, ate apples, and talked about the beautiful weather when the sun would come out. Well, she clarifies for us that in Nigeria, there's no need to talk about the weather. So, you know, it was really fun. It was a great evening. We learned a lot. And most importantly, we learned that single stories create stereotypes, not necessarily untrue, but certainly incomplete. And then another student shared how labels shape our identity, and labels are tricky. You know, call your daughter, hey, beautiful, or call someone a geek or an artist. And then there are the derogatory terms. Labels can act like handcuffs and restrain a person from becoming. Becoming what? Just becoming, whatever, no goal. We just don't want to use labels as a way to limit a person. And it can also be a dangerous weapon, just like a gun, because labels can lead to murders and suicide. Okay, so Dublin's high school film program came next on that night, and that was Michael D'Ambrosio over at Dublin High School. He has a group of filmmakers. One movie they showed us was called Educate, and please, everybody, I recommend you go see this movie. It was created May 18th, 2018, called Educate. It was with the cooperation from the Dublin Police Department that they made this. Go see it on YouTube. It's powerful and absolutely applicable to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a vivid depiction of what Black people faced in the course of what was looking like a pretty ordinary day until something happened. Just go watch it, but preview it before deciding to have your kids watch it with you. Then last May, we provided a public education event at Doherty Station. It was a panel for public education called Immigrant Journeys in Our Community. The panel was made up of San Ramon Valley residents, their personal stories. The panelists were from China, Africa, Philippines, Latin America, India, and Pakistan. And also on the panel was Bill Ong Ying, professor of law from UCSF, specializing in immigration and social justice law. Personal immigration stories about why they immigrated, a number of questions they dealt with in depth. Personal stories are one of the most powerful ways that we can bridge the gap of racism, oppression, discrimination, and build the bridges to mutual respect and a level playing field. Wow, what an event that was. So last summer, also, another thing we did, we got an introduction for a very special group of people. I say special because many of us don't have the benefit of relationships with people from the Black community. we have a single story about Black people or something close to it because we don't have friends or authentic relationships with Black people. Well, when the Diablo Black Men's Group came to visit us, we grew. Since 1999, that group has existed to promote fellowship among Black men to help African Americans and other minorities in the Diablo Valley actualize full citizenship, including liberty, education, good health, social equality, economic vitality. Our coalition learned so much that night, and the top priority of this group is to work creating scholarships, outreach, education, health, wellness initiatives to San Ramon residents. If you haven't heard of them, put the Diablo Black Men's Group on your radar and keep it there. What a fabulous resource and asset to our community these men and their families are, to San Ramon Valley and Contra Costa County too. And then just this last October, finally, this is the last thing I have to share. We dedicated a meeting to personal growth and creating a deeper, more authentic relationship with our fellow members of the coalition in order for us to be able to connect and grow with each other as a real community. So we began with a book discussion called Some of Our Friends Are: The Daunting Challenges and Untapped Benefits of Cross-Racial Friendships by Deborah Plummer. How do you make those friendships, those cross-racial friendships? It's a daunting task due to spatial racism. They aren't in our circles. With each other, we aren't. And where we're physically separated from each other. White tribalism, where is another barrier where we assume that we have same values with someone who looks like us. We all have limited time, so to fill our need for friendships, we have a tendency to get to quality connections quicker using what we assume to be shared experiences as shortcuts. So making cross-racial friendships has to be intentional. The author uses a phrase, gentle bumping, because it's sensitive, it takes work, and there's a gentle tussling involved. So I feel challenged now to seek depth in relationships, not just with people who look like me, but my other friendships and relationships too. The more one communicates and the more we can learn, the more appropriate and promising our actions and our interventions will be. So that's just some of the work we've been doing in the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition, and I'll turn it back over to Mitchell to talk about where we're going next.
Actually, we're going to talk to Kathy, who's going to talk about our upcoming meeting. No worries.
Oh, thank you, Jackie and Mitchell. And also thank you to Mayor Bill for inviting us here today to share the work of the San Ramon Valley Coalition, Diversity Coalition. Jackie, that was a beautiful summary of the work that has been going on for 3 years. And I haven't heard it put together in one place ever. So that was very impactful and powerful. Thank you for sharing that with everybody. I have been a member of the Diversity Coalition since its inception. And for a little background about me, my husband and I have lived in the San Ramon Valley for almost 30 years, and we've raised our family here. I have volunteered and worked in many areas of our community. I started as a PTA mom, became involved in local school bond elections, and then worked in county government and for local nonprofit organizations. I also volunteer on boards of community groups, including Danville Rotary and Leadership San Ramon Valley. Over the last 3 decades, I have watched this area grow in diversity and have had opportunities to get to know many people as they adjusted to life in the San Ramon Valley. And there is no doubt that life in this valley has become richer and more interesting because so many people from different cultures and races have chosen to call this beautiful place home. But with this transformation has come challenges. And that is why I became involved in the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition. How could I do more to ensure that our community embraces diversity, inclusion, and equity in all aspects of life in the valley? Ironically, I went into this effort thinking I could smooth the journey that others are making. Instead, being a member of the coalition has taken me on my own difficult and often painful journey of self-awareness around racism. Although I would never have called myself a racist, I've come to learn it is not enough to just not be racist. To address the systemic racism of which I, like Jackie, am a beneficiary, I must do more. And through my work with the coalition, I am becoming more educated, more willing to examine my white privilege, and more committed to having difficult conversations about race. Coalition meetings provide a safe place for growth, discussion, and understanding. And for that, I am truly grateful. And now I would like to tell you a little bit about our meeting next Monday. It will be our first since the death of George Floyd that has shaken our country to its core. Joining us will be Gigi Crowder, the Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Contra Costa County. Gigi is a powerful advocate for the most vulnerable among us, those who face the challenges of mental illness. She's also an activist, and after the death of Miles Hall by Walnut Creek Police last year, she has become a leader in the local movement to reform police interactions with those with mental illness. And she will speak to us on racism and discrimination and how it impacts our community. And then also speaking to our group on Monday will be Chief Craig Stevens with us today here too. And I think Chief Stevens, you need to be commended because after Mr. Floyd's death, you quickly stepped up and spoke from your heart about the impact that his death had on you and all the other members of the San Ramon PD. And it was a wonderful statement. And I thank you for making that. And on Monday, he'll talk about the calls for police reform, both nationally and locally. And we will very much look forward to your presentation on that critically important topic. We'll end our meeting hearing from various community members, including students and business people, about the effect that Black Lives Matter is having on them personally. And the coalition's goal on Monday is to yet again create another opportunity for our community to come together to listen, discuss, and grow. And we're very much looking forward to that. I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Mitchell. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thank you. So we are looking forward to a great meeting next Monday. And if anyone in the community would like to join us, please just send an email to our email address. Stephen, can you put the email address up?
Oh, I don't have a slide with the email address.
Okay.
So if you want to just state it out and we can be sure to put it up.
It is srbdc.members@gmail.com.
And we are getting questions about how people can participate in the meeting on Monday. Is it over Zoom?
It'll be a Zoom virtual meeting. They can send an email to that email address, srbdc.members@gmail.com, and we'll send out the Zoom link to those individuals. I would like to pause that this has been a very exciting week overall. Never did I ever think that in the United States, in my lovely Tri-Valley community, would I have today off, Juneteenth, which celebrates the ending of slavery. I think COVID in its own crazy way has given us a moment to pause and realize the value of all people. And I'm sure it wasn't because of the kindness of everyone's heart, but I'm glad that today is a day that we stop and reflect Juneteenth, which means a lot to my community, and I think to the United States as a whole. I also would be sure to say that this has been a great week in terms of the Supreme Court rulings. The protection of transgender people in the workplace is tremendous. Once again, this is one of the things I learned from working with the coalition. This is not my challenge, my struggle, because I have my blinders on. But I know that members in the coalition, they have family members and they are themselves are impacted by this ruling. So how can I not celebrate their victory if they help celebrate my victories? And I think this is a learning opportunity that we all have and that we cherish within the coalition. Also, just yesterday, we had a DACA protection. And once again, I didn't plan for that, but that's another great celebration. Not my direct concern or my direct challenge, but there are people at my job and in my community that does impact. So all wins are wins for our community and our people. If you ask me in the coalition, what are we going to do next? What's our next steps? What are our long-term goals? Well, over the last 3 years, we've found ourselves being a resource. We are a resource for information. We are a resource for groups who have services and opportunities that many people may not know of. They come to our group, they present, they increase their awareness. We serve as a sounding board. If there's an idea or an opportunity, we would love to have people come to our meetings and present and talk to us and give us some more information. And probably most importantly, we are a community bridge. We are taking, and I think in the coalition, we use diversity as not just a black and white or racial issue or item. We look at it as gender, sexuality, background, political beliefs, as well as physical and mental disabilities. So everyone's different. And so we take the broad stroke for diversity. And so we invite individuals to come to our organization if they can be open-minded, be present during the meetings, willing to learn, and once again, to be selfless. This is not a platform for you to rise up. This is a platform for you to learn. So moving forward, we want to have more panel discussions, education discussions. We like to create a Courageous Conversations series or panel or some type of learning series. And lastly, similar to what's happening in the United States and around the world, we want to be ahead of the curve. We don't want something to happen in our local community that blows up because we don't know each other. It's hard, as Bill always says, it's hard to hate people when you know them. It's hard to have a small spark create a ripple effect if I actually know the person personally. So that's one of the reasons why there's a value in community bridging. There's a value in getting to learn each other's background. And there's a value in just interacting. And I know it's hard. You know, we go to work, we have families. There's not enough hours in a day to then go to a meeting or then participate in an activity. But I tell you, it does bode well, it pays off, and it does add value to your life and the community. So with that being said, I will stop and hand it back to Bill.
Thank you, Mitchell. And I want to emphasize one thing you said was when we first got together, one of our goals was to get to know each other individually as people, as individuals. And to your point, when you get to know everybody really well and know them as a person, you can disagree about stuff, but get along and work through things. And I want to commend you on what that group has been doing. I want to look over to our chief now, Chief Craig Stevens. And I know that you guys have a presentation also to make, and I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to give a couple thank yous. One to you personally. This was, I know, kind of a thought that you had of knowing the need for communication between our local police and the community. And I know you had obviously very involved in the creation of the Diversity Coalition here in the San Ramon Valley, and you kind of had the thought that, hey, that might be a good mechanism to use to communicate and connect with our community. And when you presented that idea, I know just myself, I know the city manager, we thought that it was a fantastic idea, and then it became, how do we make that happen? I want to thank the members of the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition, obviously Mitchell, Jackie, and Kathy for being here today, but really the entire coalition for really agreeing and partnering with us, knowing that none of us can be really happy or satisfied where we're at today. I can speak for the police department. We're not happy with the state of things right now. We know that we need to do some things to make things better. And a big part of that obviously is establishing communications, having discussions with the community. And I think that this is going to be a great format to be able to do that. I actually wrote down just a note from the mission statement of the coalition. And it's a forum to promote constructive dialogue and to serve as a catalyst to create solutions. I think that's exactly what our goal will be as we move forward. One thing that Mitchell mentioned as well is that the coalition is made up of members of not just the city of San Ramon, but also the entire San Ramon Valley. And I was able to reach out to both Chief Shields in the city of Danville and Chief Holmes in the city of Dublin, and they are obviously very open to having their departments be involved in these discussions as well. Which I think is fantastic, because I think we can really make this a regional platform versus just something that we're doing here in the city. So I think that looking forward, that this is really a great opportunity to make some changes, work with some leaders in the San Ramon Valley, and quite frankly, and I know that everyone in the coalition will expect this. I'm expecting this, that these aren't necessarily going to be easy conversations. We're likely to have difficult, uncomfortable conversations. We are expecting that, but we're dealing with, difficult, complicated issues. So we may not always feel comfortable, but that's to me, that's what this is about. It's not just about, not really touching on what the issues are. We need to touch on them. We need to work on, again, as your mission statement very appropriately says, it's a catalyst to create solutions. And I think that's really what our goal will be moving forward in this process. So we look forward to it, and we really appreciate the partnership of the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition, and really look forward to working together as we move forward. I also wanted to take a moment to address a few topics that I know I've been posed a lot of questions from members of our community, and I'm sure these will be topics that coalition members will be curious about and will want us to describe as we move forward. And I wanted to touch on a few of those today. I'm sure some members of our community saw that I put a response out to the 8 Can't Wait initiative last week. It's an initiative that encourages law enforcement agencies to initiate certain policing policies. And I'm going to briefly kind of touch on our response to the 8 Can't Wait initiatives. If you want, you can go on our social media, and we've got a very in-depth written response to all of those 8 initiatives. And while I think there is things of value in that, I think I also realize, and we all should realize, that we need to go beyond that. There are other things that we need to be looking at other than just what is in that particular campaign. In fact, one of the initiatives in the 8 Can't Wait deals with use of force policy, procedures, and review. And I'm going to have Captain Carlson go really in depth into how we analyze those incidents in the process. And then we've also had a number of questions just regarding our training program and what sort of training we deliver to our staff, and Lieutenant Williams will go over that. So specifically regarding the 8 Can't Wait campaign, and I think it's important to note that really in the state of California, I think we're ahead of a lot of other states. In 2019, there were a couple legislations that were passed, specifically Senate Bill 230 and Assembly Bill 392, which specifically really addressed a lot of the recommendations in the 8 Can't Wait campaign. So I will likely refer to some of that legislation. But again, the benefit being in that in the state of California, many of these initiatives have already been codified. So really every department in the state of California is already meeting certain thresholds. So one initiative was to the banning of chokeholds and strangleholds. And one thing I want to say is we've actually never approved that or trained to that technique, a stranglehold or a chokehold, but we have in the past approved and trained in a restraint called the carotid restraint. Last week, I did ban that technique in our department. So from this point moving forward, that will not be an authorized technique that we use in our department. The second recommendation is a requirement of de-escalation. We do train in that, and in fact, Senate Bill 230 actually requires that officers utilize de-escalation techniques, crisis intervention tactics, and other alternatives to force when feasible. And I think Lieutenant Williams will touch on this, but we are additionally just looking at additional trainings that are out there that we can potentially offer our staff in the area of de-escalation, even above and beyond what is mandated and required. Again, just looking to, what can we do to help our officers develop and improve upon their skills. The third requirement is require a warning before shooting. And again, this is addressed in Assembly Bill 392, and it is in our policies and procedures manual. And our policy expressly requires officers to provide verbal warnings where feasible to make reasonable efforts to warn that deadly force may be used. And then Assembly Bill 392 states where feasible, a peace officer shall, prior to the use of force, make reasonable efforts to identify themselves as a peace officer and to warn that deadly force may be used unless the officer has objectively reasonable grounds to believe that the person is aware of those facts. And this requirement is consistent with what federal law states as well. The fourth initiative is exhaust all means before shooting. There's only two circumstances in which police officers in our department can use, it's referred to as shooting. I equate that to the use of deadly force, but there's only two circumstances in which our officers can use deadly force. The first circumstance is if an officer reasonably believes that the use of deadly force is necessary to protect the officer or another from the threat of imminent death or serious bodily injury. And then the second circumstance is to apprehend a fleeing person for any felony that threatened or resulted in death or serious bodily injury if the officer reasonably believes that the person will cause death or serious bodily injury to another person or to another unless immediately apprehended. The fifth initiative deals with the duty to intervene and stop excessive force by officers. That is absolutely required in our manual. Our policy expressly requires officers to intervene and stop excessive force if they observe it occurring. And it also requires that officers report that excessive force to a supervisor. And this issue is also addressed in Senate Bill 230. The sixth recommendation is to ban shooting at moving vehicles. Our policy is that we expressly prohibit shooting at moving vehicles except in certain life-threatening circumstances. And I don't want to go through certain circumstances, but there are times where that may be the only alternative that we have to prevent death to not only ourselves, but maybe to other people involved. So it would be very difficult to completely outright ban that. However, our policy is very restrictive and we can only do that under very certain limited circumstances. The seventh recommendation is the requirement of a use of force continuum. And this is a model that frankly was around when I started in law enforcement back in the early 90s. And it proved to be somewhat impractical because it kind of alluded to the fact that the use of force that was used at times would not be appropriate to what was being encountered by the officer at the time. And that policy has evolved over time, and the standard as it now is that officers should only use the amount of force that is reasonably necessary given the facts and totality of circumstances known or perceived by the officer. The way that we train in that is via force option training, scenario training. And again, this is another area that as an agency we are exploring and looking for opportunities to provide additional training to our officers. And then the eighth recommendation is require comprehensive reporting each time an officer uses force or threatens to do so. And that's exactly what Captain Carlson will be addressing. And the last thing I want to say before I turn it over to Captain Carlson is right now there is a lot of legislation regarding police reform. Some has been released already. Some of it I expect will be released probably within the next week. We're very closely analyzing the recommendations. We are looking internally at our own processes and procedures to try to identify ways that we can improve. Frankly, many of the reform initiatives that I've seen seem to make sense. They seem to be reasonable things that we can implement. There are some other initiatives that I've seen that make sense, but it's going to require some additional procedural and mechanisms in place to make them work. But I think we will have the ability to explore some of those, and if it's something that, okay, this makes sense, we'll need to figure out how we can implement it, how we can make it work. So we'll closely monitor. Again, internally, we're looking at our own processes and procedures, but also looking at a lot of the reform recommendations coming out and trying to identify areas of improvement. Frankly, I think we have an excellent police department. I am so proud of our officers. I think we do a great job. But I also know that part of what we are is that we can never be satisfied where we're at, that we need to always strive to improve. And I think that that we can do that, even though I think we are a great department and we do things right. We're not satisfied with that. We will continually keep working, trying to improve. And I mean, that's my commitment as the police chief, is that that's what we will do. If we can identify ways to get better, then we will make that happen. So with that, I want to turn it over to Captain Carlson and let him provide information on how the process that is enacted after a use of force incident occurs.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation today, Mayor and Mitchell, Jackie, and Kathy. Thank you for your involvement in the Diversity Coalition. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I've appreciated it for the last 2.5, 3 years. It's been a great experience for me to be involved, and I appreciate your leadership in that coalition. Speaking about use of force, and I wanted to go over exactly what we have in place when any use of force occurs in San Ramon with the San Ramon Police Department. And the first thing I want to do is make sure everyone's aware of exactly what we define as a use of force. So for us within our agency, anything that takes place that is above normal compliant handcuffing is considered a use of force. So if any control hold is used when someone is placed in handcuffs, if any weapon is pointed at an individual, if anything like that happens, that's a required documented use of force that must be completed by a member of our agency. We utilize body-worn cameras. We utilize in-car cameras with all of our staff. They also have a requirement to activate those devices anytime they're taking enforcement or investigative action. Now, there is a stipulation that they're not required to turn that camera or device on if it jeopardizes their safety, but that would be a circumstance where they were attacked from behind or something like that, and they couldn't simply get to their body-worn camera. So what we've done is we've created a review process to analyze all of these incidents that take place within the city. And we've done that to create a system of accountability, of analysis, and it also gives us the opportunity to improve. Because of this in-depth review process for use of force, we're able to consistently keep processes going that allow us to be as effective as possible when we're out there serving our community. So anytime a use of force takes place within San Ramon with a San Ramon officer, a review is conducted, and that's initiated by the supervisor or sergeant who oversees our defensive tactics program. He's responsible for the trainings that are put in place, and so that review is initiated by him. There's an analysis done of the actions taken by the officers. And then once that review is completed, then it goes to the internal affairs sergeant. They conduct a independent review as well of the actions, and they create a use of force packet. Inside that packet are all of the documented reports that are created by the officers involved, all of the videos associated with the involved incident. It also includes the computer-aided dispatch printout of the entire incident history and any other evidence, documentation, photographs, or anything that takes place. Once that packet is completed by the internal affairs sergeant, it is then reviewed by the professional standards and training lieutenant, who then provides their own input and analysis of it. From there, it goes to the division manager, the lieutenant who oversees the individuals involved in the incident. They provide an analysis. Then it goes to the bureau captain, overseeing the individuals involved, who provides a review. And then ultimately, every single use of force is also reviewed by Chief Stevens. So we have 6 layers in place of review throughout this entire process to ensure that we have the accountability. And I think what it's done, and I'm going to go back to one of my favorite sayings, there are some people in this video who probably have heard it several times and may be tired of it, but I think it's incredibly true, is systems in place tend to produce their intended result. And what we've done is we've created a system that promotes accountability, that promotes responsibility, that promotes analysis, and it also includes areas where we can improve. And so we're constantly looking at our use of force incidents through this entire review process to gain opportunities to be better. And that's the ultimate goal, is that we always have areas where we can improve. And this system allows us to get to that place. I also wanted to touch on a few statistics for us in the San Ramon Police Department for use of force incidents over the last few years. In 2018, we had 77 use of force incidents within the San Ramon Police Department. Now, to put that in comparison, in 2018, we also responded to over 70,000 calls for service. Now, of those 77 use of force incidents, just under 50% of those incidents involved minor physical contact, meaning that there was either no contact because it was simply something was pointed at an individual, or it was a control hold that was used to gain compliance for handcuffing. In 2019, we dropped to 75 use of force incidents, but our calls for service increased to over 80,000. So we saw a decrease in use of force incidents while we had an increase in calls for service. So it's a fraction of the calls for service that we're involved in where any type of use of force is used. So our percentages are going down. In 2020, I pulled the results, but 2020 is a little bit of an anomaly because of our shelter in place and our overall calls for service. But so far, we've only entered 26 use of force incidents into our system during 2020. So we are seeing a decrease, but in reality, I don't want to rely on those numbers too much, just simply because of what's going on this year in our community in general. I also wanted to mention that over the last 2 years, and actually since 2010, we have not had an officer discharge a firearm during a use of force incident. Over the last 2 years, we have not used an impact weapon or a baton during a use of force incident. We have not used any type of chemical agent in 2018 or 2019 during a use of force incident. And we have only had one circumstance where a taser was deployed over the last 2 years. And in that incident, the taser wasn't even used against the person involved in the use of force, the subject who force was used against. The taser was used as a de-escalation technique to gain compliance from the person involved. We have utilized a canine twice over the last 2 years, once in 2018, once in 2019. And over the last 2 years, we've only attempted the use of the carotid artery hold once. It was an unsuccessful attempt, and it took 1 second for the officer to stop using that technique. So I think what we're seeing based on the analysis of our use of force that has taken place over the last 2 years is we've seen that our system is working. Everyone understands that there's an accountability for their actions. Everyone understands that we have to act in a responsible nature to ensure what we're doing is being done in the best service of the community. So I hope that gives everyone a little bit better understanding of the use of force reviews that we do have in place at the San Ramon Police Department and the system that we utilize to make sure that we are acting as responsible as possible throughout the course of our duties.
Tami, do you want to touch on our training?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, I'm Tami Williams. I'm a lieutenant in our patrol division. And I just wanted to give a brief overview of the type of training and some topics that we cover that I think are relevant to today's discussion that all San Ramon police officers go through. The training division has three main goals in our agency. That's to enhance our service, our level of service by our officers. It's to increase expertise and our overall effectiveness out in the community. And it also provides a professional development for our officers. If you're not aware, you're not in this profession, there's an entity in the state of California called POST, and that stands for the Commission of Peace Officer Standards and Training. POST offers certification for the law enforcement agencies in our state. The majority are certified by POST, we being one of them. But what POST does is one of their tenets that they deal with is it takes legislative mandated requirements, and it publishes what officers need to go through in terms of training to remain certified as an agency. Since our inception in 2007, our department has always gone above and beyond what POST puts out as legislative requirements. But just to touch some of the topics that are related to today's discussion, use of force is covered, tactical communications, racial profiling, hate crimes, legal update. I could go on, but you can check out www.post.ca.gov for more details on what the post legislative mandates are. So outside of what they require, they set the terms of what each course has to entail to become post certified. They also set how often or how many hours each officer has to complete per year. So outside of those, and as I said before, we've always gone above and beyond. It's one of our strengths as an agency. I'd like to touch in detail on 3 different things, topics that our officers are trained in. The first is procedural justice. If you're not familiar with that topic, it covers 4 tenets of that, and that's fairness within our processes as a police department. It covers, secondly, transparency in how we do our job and in our actions. Third, it covers opportunities for voice and to teach officers to listen and to understand and not just react. And lastly, the fourth is having impartial decision-making. So in a nutshell, procedural justice is teaching our officers to have high quality and fair is the key word, fair interpersonal communication with the citizens that we contact every day on the street. Just in reference, we have 2 officers on our staff that are instructors in procedural justice. The second topic is crisis intervention. That was touched on earlier by the chief. Crisis intervention training is also known as CIT. Currently, we have 3 officers on our staff that are trained instructors. All of our officers by the end of 2020 will be trained in this. It's been on our training calendar since fall of the previous years when we design it. So we haven't gotten to all of our officers, but they will all be trained in this. That teaches a multitude of things. It teaches our officers how to not only recognize somebody that's in a mental health illness related crisis, but it teaches them how to effectively communicate. So in essence, they're de-escalating the situation. It goes through the different mental health illnesses so that we have an understanding as police officers of what people are going through and how their actions are and what their illness means. And lastly, it provides techniques on how to successfully de-escalate with a person that's experiencing one of these crises and effectively deal with them. Lastly, I'd like to touch upon, in San Ramon, we try to go outside the box with training. As the chief stated, we are consistently looking for outside opportunities away from just what post requires. And we had a diversity panel that I know many of us, if not all of us, felt was very valued. That was held in February 2019. It was comprised of a variety of members of our community here in San Ramon that represented a different multitude of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. And what it was a panel set up that all of our sworn personnel was allowed to sit in and that they had to sit in. It was part of our training day. And the panel was able to speak to our officers on their interactions with police, how they viewed police officers as a whole, and their experiences and what they took from those experiences. It was a great tool. Our officers were allowed to ask questions. The panel was allowed to ask questions back. So it was a good discussion, very constructive. In essence, and if you look at 2019, our training hours, we had a total of 14,197 total training hours for both sworn and non-sworn personnel. That averages out to approximately 179 hours per employee. And that's just for that 1 year. In addition to those hours, we have daily training bulletins. So 365 days a year, our officers are to complete these daily training bulletins. Those topics it's a variety of topics, but related to this conversation today, we have questions about ethics, arrest and detention, implicit bias, and in general, our policies and procedures to ensure that our officers not only know our policies and procedures and the rest of the topics, but understand. In conclusion, we, as I said, we're very progressive with training Our agency has always stood out in that respect. But we seriously value our relationship, and we guide our officers every day they go out on the street, that they contact community members, that they're not just dealing with the issues at hand, but they're improving the trust. They're building that trust with the community. And, we're out there, we're enhancing their professionalism and their skills through all our training. So we will continue, as the chief said, we will always have room for improvement. Nobody's ever going to master this career because of so many facets that are in it. But we are always out there looking for additional training that we can provide our officers.
Thank you, Tami. And if I could just summarize just a couple things as well, as follow up to what Denton was talking about. Not only do we do individual use of force reviews, but annually we look at our use of force reviews in total. And that is to identify, are there any training issues that based on the data that clearly indicate to us that there's areas that we need to work on. So it's, in addition to doing an individual review of every use of force incident, we do a yearly review of that as well. And then, Tami had mentioned our training, and I just want to let everybody know that the post minimum standards that are required is actually incorporated into our city's municipal code as well. So again, just I'm hoping that we were able to give a very comprehensive description of our use of force review process and our training policies and standards. And again, I'm sure that these will be topics that will come up as we move forward with our conversations with the Diversity Coalition as well. With that, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chief. Actually, given our time constraints, it's almost an hour now. I'd like to go to questions our community members have for our panelists. Steve, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do, Mayor. And also to start out, I'd like to share through the magic of PowerPoint, I was able to get the email address up for people to email if you're interested in participating in Monday's Diversity Coalition call. So I hope I got that address right. I don't see any typos. It's srvdc.members@gmail.com. Did I get that right? Okay, perfect. All right. Yes, we do have some questions. And the first one, and I do believe Lieutenant Williams touched on this, but what specific policy changes will you make to address implicit bias and embedded racist barriers? Have you ever heard of the Racial Equity Here program from Government Alliance on Race and Equity that helps local governments do just that?
I think I can take that. I have heard of that program. I am by no means an expert on it. My understanding is that is a program that there is some pilot programs going on, and they're working with some, I believe, government agencies regarding racial inequity, implicit bias training, things like that. Frankly, I think that we're looking at a lot of different training opportunities right now. And I know that's part of a lot of the reform initiatives that are being introduced. And, I think undoubtedly that as we move forward this, we're going to identify areas of improvement. We will identify, obviously, this is one particular training platform that certainly we can look at. I think there's a possibility that there may be required mandated training that may be proposed as some of these reform initiatives continue to come through. So yes, we will be looking at a lot of different programs, a lot of different training opportunities, and I fully expect that in the not too distant future, we will be implementing additional, and Lieutenant Williams did touch on this, we will be implementing additional training to address those issues.
All right, and also trying to combine some of the questions. One of the common ones is the city planning to host a separate town hall regarding racial equity and police brutality? Does the PD have separate virtual town halls? And then a follow-up to that is, where could we send questions for the police department?
Well, to answer the first part of that, absolutely. I think obviously we're dealing still with COVID issues and public health orders. So while we may not necessarily be able to, at least currently, to host town hall meetings as we normally would, I certainly anticipate that there will be significant outreach to the community. And frankly, I think that even working with the San Ramon Valley Diversity Coalition, that they certainly can be excellent, conduits of information and help with coordinating some of that outreach. So certainly, I think that as we move forward, there will be many opportunities for us to engage with our community. As far as individual questions, they can email them to me directly. I've been getting many emails from community members. So if there's a specific question, they can email me directly, and my email is on our website. It's cstevens@sanramon.ca.gov. So any community member that has a specific question or wants to engage in dialogue with me, then I would certainly be welcome to that.
All right, for the Diversity Coalition representatives, what are some of the positive changes you have seen since the formation of the SRVDC?
Like I said, I think that we have been a great resource as of now. We have been able to support the various siloed groups. So it's either in terms of small participation or financial contributions. In terms of attending events, we've invited speakers from the area of education and bridge building. I think our biggest win or biggest accomplishment that Jacquie spoke about was our immigration panel that we had last spring. I think that was a great opportunity to bring experts from outside the community as well as community members to talk about their experience and kind of tee up this this problem and this discussion in our general area.
Great, thank you. Another question, what is San Ramon's process for independent review of concerns and complaints regarding the police department that may arise?
Well, as far as independent review, I can talk in the area of fatal incident interactions, that there is a county policy that's in place that every police department in the county is part of. It's the law enforcement involved fatal incident protocol. It's a protocol that, again, every department in the county adheres to. So anytime there's an incident that meets that level of the protocol, it does initiate a process where there are a number of outside agencies that come in to assist that in that investigation. The DA's office of Contra Costa County leads that process and leads that investigation. So every law enforcement involved fatal incident that occurs in the county, the process that takes place is follows that protocol. So that is the process, and that policy is included in its entirety in our policy manual, which is posted on our website. So if anyone was interested in knowing exactly, it's a very kind of lengthy protocol. There's a lot of information in there, but if anyone wants to know specifically, that protocol is on our website.
All right, next question. What are some concrete changes the Diversity Coalition is hoping to see in our area in the future?
I think we should probably hold off on providing that level of detail. I think it's something that, one, I want to make sure that the entire coalition agrees upon, and that we work with the neighboring or the city or the neighboring cities to make sure that there are things that we can do and that we have a stronger voice, and not put a position out there that we as community members can't follow through on, or that is half-baked. So I like to just kind of hold off on that. And like I said, this is a long-term journey. This is something that we have put our time into on the 3-year process to, one, get a strong foundation, have outreach to city officials and institutions and organizations. And we definitely feel like there's opportunity for us to help drive conversations and put ideas and some opportunities out there for change.
Great, thank you. And Mayor, I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
How do officers respond to mental health calls? Why don't mental health professionals go instead?
Well, I think that's an interesting issue, and frankly, there's a lot of discussion specifically about that particular issue. You know, mental illness is a concern for all of us, and some of the proposals that are out there, and I think some of the reform that I think likely we're going to see, and I know there's already some programs that are in place throughout the country that actually call for some sort of civilian response to certain people that are suffering some sort of mental health crisis. You know, having either a clinician or a counselor respond to some of those calls versus a police officer. And I think on the surface, in a lot of ways, that makes sense. We receive some training, but certainly we're not clinicians. We're not counselors. So I had mentioned earlier, talking about reform, that I had talked about, that I think there are some reform initiatives that seem to make a lot of sense, but we need to figure out how do we make that work? You know, what mechanisms can we put in place? And this is, I think, a perfect example of that. You know, procedurally, if someone needs to be committed because they're a danger to themselves or someone else, or they're gravely disabled, as it currently stands, there's only two groups of people that can do that commitment. It's either police or certain trained doctors. So as it stands right now, if it gets to the point to where someone meets that criteria, unless some sort of procedural changes are implemented, we would have to likely be the ones to fill out that paperwork and do the actual commitment. Could there be changes to that? Certainly there could. And then I think, you know, there's the safety issue as well. You know, how do we address the safety issue? Some of these incidents can be unpredictable. They can start out one way and kind of go to something else. And I actually just did a use of force review on an incident that we had that it was a call. A young man, his family had called. He was acting erratically. Our officers went out there, and initially it was very calm. Didn't appear to be any issues. The young man started to become a little more agitated. It got to the point to where he took all of his clothes off and then made a comment to the officers that he was going to go to the kitchen and get a knife and stab himself, and they were able to restrain him, actually with the help from a family member that was present as well. And it was you know, low level of force, no injuries, and ultimately we were able to hopefully get him some help. But I think it's situations like that we need to figure out, how is it going to work if we're going to have civilians responding to those type of calls. So again, I think on its face, I think that there may be some value in doing that. I certainly won't argue that there may be professionals who would be have better tools and better training to be able to address some of these calls. But we need to figure out, you know, how can we make this work procedurally, and how can we, you know, do it where everyone is safe. And I think that this will be, in particular, I know there's discussions that are occurring at a county level. And I think that this will be something that there will be a lot of discussions moving forward, specifically about that particular issue.
Thank you, Chief. Steve, thank you very much. We went over a little bit. I appreciate everybody's patience in letting us do this. I want to do a special thank you to Jacquie Guzzo for being here, Kathy Chiverton, Mitchell Hopson, and your leadership. Lieutenant Williams, thank you for all your help today and your feedback. Captain Carlson, thank you very much. Chief, as always, it's really appreciative of everything you do for us here in the city. Joe, appreciate your leadership, sir, and day in, day out. And of course, Steve, for taking questions and making it all work behind the magic green curtain. Everybody, thank you. Have a safe weekend.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. Thank you.